Hi there, folks. It's Jonathan Denwood here. And like in my video, why I dislike Jason Calacanis. Well, I've got to admit, to start off with, it's a bit of link bait. You know, it is 2021. And, you know, when you're hustling, you got to do what you got to do. But there is also substance. You know, I don't hate Jason. I've never met the man. And I'm only talking about Jason, the public persona, the public individual that does This Week in Startups, the podcast, and does his public presentations. I don't know the real Jason. So I want to make that clear. But what also is a factor, there's going to be about 2 to 3 things that I want to go through in this video, is that one of the factors might be the differences in upbringing between me and Jason. You know, I've been living in America for almost 15 years. I'm a dual citizen, and Jason comes from New York, from Brooklyn. And even though he's a very different individual, in style, he has a similar, in some ways, a similar persona to ex-President Trump that also was a New Yorker. This kind of rough and ready street vibe, that he's the big beast in the room, that he knows more, that he's streetwise. Even though Jason has never really roughed it that much in his life, just like the ex-President Trump, you know, who was in reality born with a silver spoon in his mouth and inherited $250 million from his dad. So he definitely never roughed it in his life. But they have that kind of, they want to have this rough and ready feeling, and I think it comes from Jason's background, being brought up in Brooklyn, which is very different to the way I was brought up. You know, for almost 40 years I was brought up in my childhood in the suburbs of London, and in some ways I've become a hybrid, but my attitudes and the way I see the world was formulated by the English culture, which doesn't really like that New York, Brooklyn, in-your-face brashness. It kind of jails a little bit with me. So that's a factor. But I think there's more important factors that I want to get on with in this video. Another factor, I think, in the way Jason sees the world is, and he's been very open about this, this is one of the strengths of Jason, is his openness to a certain degree. I'm sure he doesn't tell everything. We all have secrets that we don't want the world to know. But increasingly with social media, we have become what Andy Warhol predicted. You predicted that for 15 minutes, we will, in the end, we will all become stars of media. And that's what's happened to us all, hasn't it? But like I say, he's been quite open about his upbringing, his relationship with his father, which by what he has said in public was a difficult relationship. You know, his father ran a bar, restaurant, got in trouble with the Internal Revenue Service, was bankrupt. Jason had to go through that with the family, the consequences of that. I think it's one of the things that really drives Jason. You know, is a really key to his psyche to some extent. And you know, that's why he was prepared to do the level hustling that he was prepared to do in his early days, when he was, I think it was the Silver Valley reporter. I think that was it. That was his magazine, which I think which he started in the mid to late 90s in New York, which was about tech and in the internet tech bubble that was developing in New York and on the West Coast. And he started that, he hustled, he built that up. He became what is known now, but wasn't known then, a influencer in New York in that investment tech group of people that could see financial opportunities and cultural opportunities in the new internet, the new web. You know, obviously, when the bubble burst in 2000, that particular business went bankrupt. And I don't hold, you know, there's been a couple of failures in Jason's business career, but, you know, I think there have been honourable failures. They're not been failures that were designed to happen. There have been consequences of changes in market conditions. You know, then he had his big success with Weblog Inc., I think it was, you know, with his co-founder, which, you know, the timing of it, you know, in business, you need to be driven, you need to be able to operate at a certain level. You know, you need smarts and technical smarts. I think the technical side came from his joint founder, but Jason provided the kind of instinctive business side of it and the drive to move it on. But also they were lucky because they made their luck because they could see an opportunity. Blogging at the time had been pumped up to a ridiculous level. You know, it was the in thing at that time. That bubble burst, but in 2 years, they managed to build up a substantial business, and they managed to get American Online, I think it was Time Warner American Online, to buy it from them for $20 to $30 million. I think that's been reported. How much? I think Jason has publicly said that he made between 7 to 10 million from that sale. Very nice. I think he talks about how he was waiting on his computer from his bank to say that the check had been deposited into his account, and he kept refreshing the browser until that showed his bank account. He kept refreshing it, and then suddenly a 7-figure figure appeared in his account, and it said, you know, it's a moment that he will never forget. And with entrepreneurship, you have your ups and downs. I've had that, not the ups and successes that he has had. It's quite funny, though, that he sold, you know, it's quite evident that he sold it and made his initial bank from an organization like American Online, you know, Time Warner, you know, organization that he's made it quite clear that when he had to do his time with them, he hated being with them, he hated their bureaucracy, he hated their culture, and basically he thought they were a bunch of wankers. He was probably right. He's probably right about that. American corporate culture, to say it sucks any kind of artistry or any joy out of business would be an understatement. But being that he likes to wrap himself in the clothes of entrepreneurship, that he actually made his money by selling it to a corporate entity that, to say the least, is dire, would be an understatement. But then we go on to the really interesting part, and the part that I criticise Jason the most about, is he then leaves American Online, and you can't blame him for that, and he joins the hedge fund Sequoia Capital. Now, you know, I don't know what title he was working for him. I think he was working for him for 18 months to 2 years. And basically what he was a talent scout, like in sports, soccer. I come from England, where it's called football. They have, most clubs have talent scouts looking for young talent or talent in general, that these scouts get a commission in finding players that could make a difference to the team. And that was the arrangement. I think Jason got a salary, but if he also got a percentage if Sequoia invested in the companies that he brought to their attention. And one of those companies was Uber. And Jason, I think it was about $25,000, he invested in this company, Uber, you know. Now, I don't know how much, I think he still holds that investment in the company, and I think he's publicly stated that he has no intention of selling that anytime soon. And I think it's worth like 80 to 100 million, I'm not sure, but I think that's the public figure that's out there. Now, the way Jason describes this is that he had superior knowledge. He had the skill to see a winner, that as a VC, Sequoia, you know, they're looking for those unicorns, those billion-dollar unicorns, and they have to spread their money out to a lot of companies before they find that unicorn. This is the public propaganda that Silicon Valley and Jason and Sequoia try and spread, which I think to some degree is bullshit, basically. It's fantasy, as far as I'm concerned. What could be described as a bit of a more darker way of describing Jason's relationship with Sequoia and their Inc. is it's a club of rich people that have access to information and to resources, capital, that we don't have. You know, if you're a small business or a startup or individual, if you're a poor individual in America, you have to go and get a payday loan at an interest rate of 150%, or you get a loan on your car at 50% interest rate, or you have to use your credit card at 29% interest rate. Everywhere there are people in America wanting to loan you money at where they get the money at 0.5%, 1%, or if they're really big, they're not charged anything to borrow the money, you know, and then they lend it to poor and to the average Joe American at 29%. Well, any idiot can make money, can't they, if they're getting the money at 1% and they're lending it to people at 29%, and the majority of them keep on paying, they don't default. So is it brilliance, or was it the dirty phrase insider trading? Now, me bringing up that phrase will get the jackals up of Jason and his crony friends in Silicon Valley, because if you're involved in inside trading in the stock market and in New York, you know, in the street, if you're caught and it can be proven that you are inside trading, you can go to prison. It's a criminal offence if it can be proven that you're trading on Wall Street, but you're trading as an insider trader, that you're getting information that you shouldn't have access, that you're manipulating the market unfairly. Now, Jason would say, what is the boundary between knowing the right people, knowing what's going on, being an insider? What's the difference between that and really being an insider trader? It's you can see it's a very fine line, isn't it? It's a very interesting way to look at things. Did he benefit from true insight, or did he benefit because he was Sequoia and he had managed to get himself embedded with this small group of libertarian techno investors who had the capital and access to the information that we aren't allowed to be privileged of, and we're not allowed to have that information even now. It's an interesting argument, isn't it? And it's one of the main reasons that I would criticize Jason is he doesn't really talk about the privilege of his position. He kind of makes out that he is this knowledgeable, all-knowing VC that started certain trends in the VC industry. But maybe it's just that he knew the right people, and those people had access to information that we didn't have access to. Maybe it's just that simple, folks. But then you also got this other side of Jason, this moralistic side, this side that he criticizes various entities, companies, WeWorks, you know, there are cockroaches, but let's be quite frank about it. One of the most ugliest companies is Uber. You know, the founder of Uber, which Jason consistently made excuses of, and in his own podcast consistently, this individual is learning. We all make mistakes. It was endless excuses, but it was proven that the founders of Uber, to say they were a motley group would be an understatement. And also they've been the purveyors of this culture, of this using subcontractors, providing no benefits, pretending these people are independent contractors, the gig economy, as Jason and his cronies like to utilize. The truth is, millions of Americans work for Uber as their third job. They literally have to work 80 to 90 hours just to keep a roof over their heads for themselves and their families. The whoring out of real work in America, and how companies like Uber have been vultures upon these people is quite nauseating. What also interests me, I'm influenced by Jason because I am an entrepreneur myself. And then I'm also influenced by Chris Hedges, the great socialist, Christian socialist commentator and writer. And I love Chris, and Chris seems a great guy, but I call him Dr. Doom. Watching one of Chris's great presentations about the reality of the conditions of a lot of Americans find themselves is a little bit depressing, even though it's totally true. And then you have the more upbeat world of Jason and his Silicon Valley crew. And they seem to live in a totally different world to, almost 100 million plus Americans. And it's fascinating that how Jason classifies all these people as semi-losers. And his crowd are the real winners, the real people that get stuff done. Which there's an element of truth to that, but it's also that this 100 million plus Americans are being screwed over quite well by the system. As Jason says about Uber and these other investments he makes, and most of them, not all of them, are really kind of really sucking the last life out of a larger proportion of Americans. Uses this term that always which part of me actually smiles when he ever uses it, this yum yum comment that he makes. It is quite fascinating how he kind of sees himself as this individual that takes the red pill, yet to some extent I think it's actually the opposite. He's on the blue pill, that he doesn't really, when he was thinking of becoming the mayor of running to become the mayor of San Francisco, his comments that the homeless and the wretchedness that you actively see in Sacramento or in the certain parts of San Francisco, and when I've been to San Francisco, it truly is wretched. I've never seen more in such a liberal city which has been dominated by liberals for so long. I have never seen more wretched people on the street than San Francisco. But his solution was to offer them accommodation, but in feeder towns or feeder areas on the outskirts of San Francisco where they could be housed, or I don't know what term he used. It wasn't housed. They could be warehoused. I think that is the term that he used. I think he used some of those terms in his own podcasting. To say it was quasi-fascist would be an understatement. The other factor is recently he's gone on this rampage about China. And don't get me wrong, the things that the Chinese Communist Party do are nauseating and a truly evil force in the world. But what Jason seems not to be able to see through his blue pilling is that the people that he mixes with, that he glorifies, that he mixes with every day, are exactly the people that invested and built up China and the Chinese Communist Party, that gave them the resources to spy on their population, that gave them the resources to put the Uyghurs in the concentration or re-education camps as the Chinese Communist Party. Without the investment and the patronage of those people that Jason mixes with, the Chinese government couldn't have done what they are doing and planning to do. So for Jason to get onto a moral high ground and start throwing bricks at people is semi-hilarious, really. This has become a bit of a rant, isn't it? I gonna end it now. I'll be really interested in your comments, what you think of what I've just said. I still watch Jason and I still listen to his podcast religiously because, like I say, I have very mixed feelings about him. But I still find him engaging, interesting. I just don't think he's really aware of how blue pill he is to some extent. He really does I feel honestly that he's really one of these red pill people, and he's not really. I'll see you soon, folks. Bye.